What's the fantasy football outlook for the Sunday slate of wild card games, including Bills and Steelers and Packers and Cowboys and then Lions and Rams? It's time to break it down right here and right now as we begin another edition of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. We're your destination to become the smartest fantasy football player in your league, whether you're playing seasonal or daily fantasy football year-round. We're part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, your fantasy football team every day as well. I'm one of your co-hosts, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL, fantasy, and betting for sportingnews.com.
Hey, I'm Michelle Magdziuk, researcher at NFL Network and fantasy analyst for NFL.com.
All right, Michelle, we do have a very packed show here looking at all the Sunday games. We have three. We talked about the two Saturday games. If you missed that, check it out. They're breaking down what you should do there with fantasy, looking at the Browns, Texans, and Chiefs, Dolphins, as well as the Saturday DFS slate. We're going to look at all three Sunday games. So we'll give each game its own segment here, starting with the Bills and Steelers and go all the way through the nightcap, Lions hosting the Rams. Before we do that, I do have to tell you this episode brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest, most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. We'll have our Prize Picks fix the week there for you for the wild card round on Friday. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use the promo code all lowercase LockedOnNFL for first deposit match up to $100. All right, Michelle, we got to get into these games. There's a lot to talk about, so let's do it right away. It's your Steelers. You have made no secret about them being your favorite team here. Steelers at Bills. Steelers, one of the biggest long shots of the weekend. They're the number 7 seed going into number 2 Buffalo. Let's start with this. Mason Rudolph, Josh Allen. What do you expect from these quarterbacks? Rudolph kind of has guided the team to the playoffs. Josh Allen, we know, has been dealing with the interceptions all season long.
Yeah, so, I mean, without TJ Watt, Josh Allen should have a fine day. It should be pretty easy. This defense with and without TJ Watt were night and day last year. And there's some turnaround, some additional players, maybe some differences, but, without TJ Watt, this is going to be really hard for this defense to contain Josh Allen. Gabe Davis won't be there, so we'll talk about Stephon Diggs and his impact on this game in a second. Mason Rudolph's line is set at just a half a passing touchdown, so he would need one passing touchdown to hit the over. Do you think he could do it? This Bills defense is weird. Like, they're still good despite all of the injuries.
Yeah, when you look at this, I think, look, it's tough. I mean, Josh Allen is kind of all over the place. Will this be a James Cook game? On the other side, will this be a Najee Harris game? So I don't think those are two things you need to navigate, right? With the passing touchdowns here, where are the scores going to come from? And Josh Allen, of course, can steal his own touchdown by running in the end zone. So that's always tricky with Josh Allen. So I would think they come out running in this game. It seems weird that that's what the Bills would do, but I think that's a really good way to attack the Steelers defense. As you mentioned, their injuries all across the board, right in the middle of the field, have kind of decimated them. And it might be a little bit better here in certain areas, but without TJ Watt, who's a very good all-around defender, it's really hard to go that way. So, yeah, it's going to be really tough here for the Steelers going in defensively. So I do quite a bit like maybe the James Cook pivot here away from Josh Allen this week. And look, it's going to be tough with the attention that Stephon Diggs has gotten. I know he had a good rebound game in week 18 against the Dolphins, but that's a tough spot. So I think I would be very wary of going over any touchdown totals here for the passing guys in this game.
Yeah, both teams are leaning on the run game right now. James Cook efficiency has gone down. He's still getting a lot of carries and touches, but like after that span of 5 games where it was like 100 scrimmage yards, and then that huge massive blowout game of 221 scrimmage yards, it's been down. He's been down to 70, 44, 52. They have his line at 88.5 scrimmage yards and 65 rushing yards, which he hasn't gotten close to the 65 rushing yards in either of the 2 last games. But Najee Harris, on the other hand, they have his line down at 60.5 rushing yards. The last 3 games, he's had 78, 122, and 112 with 27 and 26 carries the last 2 weeks. It all comes down to, can they keep the game close, right? Because if the Bills just get a huge early lead, that's going to limit Najee Harris. But I do like for both Najee Harris and James Cook to get a lot of carries. And I really like that Najee Harris rushing yard line. Which would those guys you feel better about with their rushing yard line?
I feel pretty good. Of course, I'm going to go with the guy with lower rushing yards, but I also think that the Bills should be playing with a positive game script. So when you look at that, I mean, only 5 yards difference. I think I would go James Cook. I'm not interested in the scrimmage yards, right? I thought James Cook would be more involved in the passing game, but if they're playing from ahead, they're not going to throw to him. And the other thing, Najee Harris, I don't know if they're going to force the ball to him. I know he's a capable receiver, so I'm going to avoid the scrimmage ones, but I think I'm going much better feeling about these 2 rushing totals than anything with the quarterbacks in this game. And I think that probably goes for the receivers as well.
Yeah, so there's like 3 receivers to consider in this game, right? Because Gabe Davis is going to be out. So Stephon Diggs, how many more targets does he get? He finally had a solid game. Week 18, it was a long time since he had. I mean, the 4 weeks prior were miserable for him. He had under 30 receiving yards in 3 of those 4 games. The other one was 48 yards. They have his line pretty low, 61.5 receiving yards. And I think he's going to get enough targets without Gabe Davis that he's going to hit that. Even if he's super inefficient, I don't think the Steelers have a good enough secondary to really control Stephon Diggs fully. So I would bet the over on him. But then when it comes to the Steelers side with Deontay Johnson or George Pickens, both of their lines are super low. You have Deontay sitting at 38.5 receiving yards, Pickens at 40.5 receiving yards. I like both of those. I really do, because if they get down, they're going to have to throw a ton. I really, really love the Deontay Johnson one. He's had double that in each of the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, I would feel better about Johnson, right? I mean, George Pickens is a little bit big play dependent. He's going to kind of need a shot or 2 from Mason Rudolph to make it happen. The Bills' pass rush could have something to say about that. So I'm feeling it with Deontay Johnson. I'm not feeling it too much with Stephon Diggs, because what have we seen the pivot? It wasn't a lot of Gabe Davis, right? Some games Gabe Davis was 0 anyway,
Yeah.
right? So it's a lot of Khalil Shakir. It's a lot of especially Dalton Kincaid. We've seen Dawson Knox been involved a little bit more. They're going to spread the ball around a little bit more. At least with the Steelers, I think it's going to be pretty concentrated with a few guys. So you have a shot with Pickens, but based on the low value of this number, I know it's a tough matchup. I think I have to go with Johnson at 38.5 because, again, I think he'll get enough targets and volume to make that happen, where Pickens, again, it's a little bit more boom or bust, right? I think with Johnson, you're safe either way with his number. And Diggs, again, even 61.5 gives me pause. Even though he hit that last week, he wasn't hitting it. And look, this offense is not going to change from what really worked for them. So let's look at this.
It's an easy smash over. I could see him having a Trey McBride type game like he had against the Steelers. Steelers can't cover the middle. Dalton Kincaid should see those targets for sure. So I'm with you there. And Stephon Diggs, we'll see. They have to give him targets. If they're up big, that means Stephon Diggs is probably involved, right? Do you expect this game to be as low scoring as Vegas does? They have it at 36.5 points, really, really low. Both defenses have allowed very few points per game this year. Both rank top 5 this year in points per game allowed, or top 6 anyways. What are you seeing for points in this game?
Yeah, actually, I saw it when I was picking earlier the week for Sporting News. It was at 37.5, so it's actually dropped a little bit, maybe because of Gabe Davis, one less weapon in there or whatever. But I like to go slightly over. I have the Bills actually winning this game. We'll get into that right away. It's a 9.5 or 10-point spread, depending on where you're looking at it now. I actually have them winning and covering. I just think it's too hard for the Bills or the Steelers' offense and defense in this game. So I really like the Bills in this one. I took them 27-13. I know you won't like that result, but I like them to cover and have the over here because I think there's just too much offense on the field.
Yeah, obviously my heart really wants to say the Steelers have a chance in this game, but the Bills have been really, really good at home this year. 7-1, they beat up on teams there. The Steelers have not been prepared under Mike Tomlin heading into the playoffs. I mean, they've allowed so many points in each of their last 4 playoff games. They got their butts kicked the last 2 of their playoff games. And yeah, it's different quarterback, it's a different team, but also it being Mason Rudolph doesn't make me feel any better than it being Ben Roethlisberger, right? So Mike Tomlin hasn't had his guys ready for the playoffs. they're probably going to get their butts kicked. The Bills probably win by 10 points. So I'm with you there. But I don't know where to go with the point line because it's so low. The Bills
Yeah.
could hit 37 by themselves.
Yeah, I think I would go over. I think it's a little too low based on
Yeah.
how much the Bills have, and I think it's a little overrating, right? The public are going to say, "Oh, Steelers defense, we're going to put it lower," but we know the Steelers defense, as you know, hasn't been the Steelers defense we know, especially without T.J. Watt in there. So we'll get into the next game. This is the marquee game, probably the highest rated game. Packers-Cowboys on Sunday afternoon. In the next segment, then we'll close with Rams-Lions. But first, we got to hear from one of our sponsors. This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is sponsored by BetterHelp. And look, you may be wanting to give therapy a try. And look, it's hard to take that first step and get help for ourselves. We can get lost a lot in life. And sometimes we need a little bit more than a personal roadmap. We might need someone to provide the GPS for us to get us in the right direction and feeling that we're not lost and we do have help. And with BetterHelp, you can really know that they're going to get you paired with the right therapist, and it's online. So if you're maybe nervous about going in person, BetterHelp has got you covered because you can have great therapy right there in the comfort of your own home. It's convenient there as well. This is a good time to give BetterHelp a try. It's really flexible and suited to your schedule, and all you have to do to get started at BetterHelp is just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist. And the best thing is you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge, so until you feel like you have the right fit. And that's the biggest thing. The first step is wanting and knowing you need therapy. The next step is feeling right with the person that you're sharing all this with and trying to get back on track with. So BetterHelp is going to help you do just that. It's very easy. Celebrate the progress you made and continue to work on your best self. Visit betterhelp.com/lockdown today. Get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, H-E-L-P, betterhelp.com/lockdown to get that 10% off your first month. All right, Michelle, let's continue the show. We have a big marquee game. This is actually a pretty big spread, however, in favor of the Cowboys. They're 7.5-point favorites. That's been steady all week at home against the Packers. Jordan Love, the last team in from the NFC. So let's start there with Jordan Love and Dak Prescott. Dak on fire the second half of the season. MVP candidate, Jordan Love, breakout guy down the stretch here. What do we expect from these quarterbacks? And I guess we're going to start with the passing touchdown total.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about two guys here who led the NFL in passing touchdowns. Dak at number 1, Jordan Love at number 2. Both of their lines are at 1.5 passing touchdowns. But the thing is, Dak's line, they should probably make it higher because they have him at minus 172. So you're not going to make much money on your bet if you bet that he's going to have more than 1.5 passing touchdowns, which I do expect him to have. He's had 2+ passing touchdowns in 10 of the last 11 games, right? And each of his last 6 home games. So I do fully expect Dak to at least throw 2 touchdowns in this game. Jordan Love, though, on the other hand, minus 125, but you could still take that bet. Like you could still win decent amount of money on that. And Love has had 2+ passing touchdowns in 8 of his last 9 games. So, a little bit harder of a defense against the Cowboys. I know it's on the road, but I don't think they're going to be able to run all over the Cowboys. So I like Jordan Love to have 2 touchdowns in this game.
Yeah, the only concern again with Jordan Love is kind of with Josh Allen. He has run in quite a bit. So if he steals a touchdown there, that's there. But they really are not running anywhere else, right? We're not seeing the backs really score. So that's the one thing about this. And same thing with Dak Prescott, right? Tony Pollard just cannot get going near the goal line. So if they're going to score touchdowns, either team, it's probably going to be through the air in this one, unless you have a special teams or defensive score in the mix. Now, the passing yards are interesting for Dak, 275.5. I like it. I think it's a little too high just because what if the Cowboys have one of those games, right? Special teams and defense, and it's rolling, and Dak could have a great game with just 260. He could go 260-3, and they're good to go in this game, right? With a little bit of running down the stretch with different guys. So I think it's a little too high. I don't like it when it gets a little too close to 300 for me.
I'm okay with taking the over. I actually think it's a smash bet. The last 6 home games, he's averaging 326 passing yards per game. So that gives you a 50-yard margin of a little leeway there in case they do beat up on the Packers. But again, I expect the Packers to be able to put up some points on the defense. So even last week, we saw Dallas beat up on the Commanders, and Dak was still out there until with really no reason. They still kept him out there way too long. So I think in the playoff games, they're just going to keep going and going and going. So I'm going to take Dak 275.5 over, smash that. But for him to get that over, he's going to have to target his favorite guy, CeeDee Lamb. Yeah. CeeDee Lamb's line is sitting at 100.5 receiving yards. It's very, very high. And do you think he's going to hit it? I mean, we saw last week hit 98 yards, so he would have just got under there. Again, didn't play most of the fourth quarter. 2 weeks prior, 227 yards and 118. What do we think CeeDee Lamb does in this game?
Well, I like the fact that two receivers in this game, they're the primary receivers for each team, CeeDee Lamb and Jaden Reed, they really do a lot of damage working the slot. And then you get the better matchups, right? And that's why CeeDee Lamb's gone off. They align him well. He beats all these guys inside. He's a smooth route runner, can get downfield and stretch the field in the middle of the field if needed, or just line up outside and do his damage. So that's why I like CeeDee Lamb a lot. I mean, we know Jair Alexander, there's been some controversy with how he's lining up and how this Packers secondary is played. There's going to be some confusion. Lamb, they can scheme open here pretty well. So, yeah, I think this is a bigger smash to me at 100.5 than it is Dak. Dak just a little bit. I'm not saying you don't go for the Dak one, but if I'm going to feel a little bit more confident, I go to CeeDee Lamb. Now, I mentioned Jaden Reed. Look, 48.5 is the number here. We know they're banged up. This is a really low number. I mean, pretty much, I think it's maybe been 6 to 8 weeks, Michelle. We've been on Jaden Reed, especially with these kind of numbers with the props, and they're pretty modest, right? They're just not acknowledging that he is kind of the default go-to guy at this point. He's the guy that, when healthy, that Jordan Love trusts the most. So, look, okay, I'm going to order them in order of smash. Jaden Reed at 48.5, then I'm going CeeDee Lamb, then I'm going Dak.
Yeah, Jaden Reed's line is way too low at 48.5. He's hit that each of the last 3 weeks. Well, hit it each of the last 2 weeks. I mean, nearly double each of those 2 weeks. He's their top guy right now. He's their top option. He was even banged up last game. He was doubtful to play, played, and had a career game with 112 yards. I'm easily taking this over, and I feel really good about that. But then what about Aaron Jones? Because the Packers have been leaning on him a lot over the last month. A lot. They forgot he existed, and he was dealing with his own injuries as well. But the last 3 weeks, 21 carries, 20 carries, 22, all over 110 rushing yards in each of those 3 games. And his efficiency has been fantastic. Not getting into the end zone still, though. So not going to bet on a touchdown for him. But his line's at 71.5 rushing yards. Do we think they continue to lean on him, especially when he's pretty much the one guy in this team that has the playoff experience as well on the offensive side of the ball?
I'm just a little bit worried, right? If they fall behind, what is the volume going to be like? And they haven't been the most efficient running team all season long with their offensive line. So I think I would stay away from it. I think there's enough value in other places, right? I'd go there. I might be more interested in seeing Tony Pollard because the Packers' run defense has been so bad. And Pollard might get a little bit of a discount, right? With his total not being as high as you would think for a feature running back. So if I'm going with any back, I'm going Pollard. But it's just hard because these teams – as we started at the top talking about Love and Prescott with their TD passes, it hasn't been a lot of real inspiring play from the running games in this one. So I would stay away from that and really maybe focus a lot on the passing games in this one. And it should be a high-scoring game. Interesting total as well. I'm surprised that it went this high.
Yeah, the total right now for the game points is 50.5 points. Now, I mean, we've seen Dallas, they were averaging nearly 38 points per game at home this year. So if they get what their average is, then the Packers have to do very little on their side to hit this over. So the Packers are favorites by 7.5. I do think the Cowboys, I think I said the Packers. The Cowboys are favorites by 7.5. I do think the Cowboys win. I don't think they cover 7.5 points. I do think they hit the over in the game, though, not by a ton. I don't think it's going to be an insanely high scoring game, but I do think the Cowboys should score around 30, given the Packers score 24, something like that.
Yeah, I looked at this, and usually when I do this, I pick the score before I look at the over-under, just so I don't get biased or influenced by it. And it started at 49.5. So it's gone up a point. You won't believe what I had it. I had it as 33-17. So I was over and now I'm under. So I'm a little confused. That tells me I'm going to stay away from this based on my own kind of feeling, right? It's just right there. Like it could be, this is why this line is very good here in this game overall, but I do feel more confident. I have the Cowboys winning and covering easily in this one. The 7.5, they're very good at home, right? The two games they struggled in recently, they were both recently Seahawks and Lions, right, where they couldn't cover, but they were destroying. And I think the Packers are more a mediocre team. They're not a very solid team. I mean, they're not the Lions. So I'm going to say this is a weak enough opponent at home that Cowboys, the only team that went undefeated in the regular season, usually destroy, and they're going to take advantage. They didn't even think they were going to have a home game. So I think they'll take advantage and cover the spread. I don't think they'll do it next week, and they'll probably lose. But here, they're going to win their one playoff game.
Yeah, and the Packers are so inexperienced. We can't really expect them to come out and, do too well in this playoff game. But this should be a fun one either way. We'll get into the last game of the night, the one I'm most excited for this weekend. Rams at the Lions. We get Matthew Stafford versus Jared Goff. It should be a great matchup. We'll get into all of that after we hear from another one of our great sponsors. This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by Jace Medical. I know we come to sports to escape from some of the crazy realities of real life, but can we talk just for a minute about preparing for real life? According to the FDA, pharmacies are running out of antibiotics like amoxicillin right in the middle of the worst flu season in over a decade. This is scary. I can't imagine a more helpless feeling than if my wife or one of my nieces or nephews got sick while a supply chain issue kept them from a life-saving medication they needed. Thankfully, we'll be okay because of Jace Medical. The Jace case is a pack of 5 different antibiotics to treat a long list of bacterial illnesses, including UTIs, respiratory infections, sinus infections, skin infections, among others. This stuff could happen to any of us. Visit jacemedical.com and complete your physician encounter. It will be reviewed by a board-certified physician, and your medications will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular cost. It's never been more important to be prepared than today. Go to jacemedical.com and use offer code LOCKEDON to get $20 off your order. Again, that's just go to jacemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com and use offer code LOCKEDON to get $20 off your order. Let's hop right into this fun night game on Sunday night. Rams at the Lions. Matthew Stafford goes back to Detroit. I don't know how to take this game. I can see it going anywhere. The Lions are favored by 3 points, probably just because they're home, right?
Yeah.
But who are we expecting here to come out on top of a better performance? Jared Goff or Matthew Stafford? Both of these guys' lines are sitting at 1.5 passing touchdowns. And I would be shocked if either of them didn't have 2 passing touchdowns in this game.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're going to have to put the ball up in the air because the Rams have been very, very good against the run. They really like their young nose tackle. He's been really coming through with Aaron Donald, so he's had a big year. You also look at the Lions. They've been stout against the run all season long. So just like in this other game that we just talked about, I'm staying away from the running backs, right? I'm in on the running backs of James Cook and Najee Harris, out on Pollard and Jones. I think I'm out on Williams and especially Jahmyr Gibbs with Dave Montgomery, right? I don't, in terms of their rushing, right? If I'm going to look for something, I'm going to look at touchdowns, I'm going to look at receiving yards, those type of things. And they don't really throw to Kyren Williams. So that also hurts his value, right? If he can't run, he's not going to put up a lot of numbers. So I look at this going back. I think Jared Goff, Matthew Stafford, yeah, it's going to be what we expect. It's a double revenge game. You don't get these very often, and they're revenge against each other, right? Their teams moved on for the other guy, so they're both a little bit maybe playing with a chip on their shoulder in this game, especially Jared Goff maybe, and Stafford coming back to Detroit and maybe having something to prove there as well, was not being able to win playoff games there. So all that stuff, there's all these things, emotional things that are going to push it here, but yeah, anything with the passing touchdowns and yardage, I'm buying. I'm going in this one. I'm going there. Avoid the running backs.
See, I'm with you about the passing touchdowns, and I like Matthew Stafford's passing yards a lot. It's sitting at 272.5. I like Stafford to have more than that. He's been throwing a ton of yards all year long. Where he was struggling was the touchdowns, but over the last month or a little bit more than that, he's been on a touchdown tear before week 17. So I'm good with all of those, but I also, and I'm with you on the Lions running backs, with them splitting the backfield, not loving it. Their efficiency has also gone down on both sides here with Gibbs and Montgomery. Kyren Williams, on the other hand, though, I don't care what matchup he has. I don't care if the Lions are good at run defense. He's going to hit his over. It's 82.5 rushing yards.
Oof.
He's hit that each of the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games, and most of them by a ton. And he's had hard matchups. The Browns are not an easy matchup. He hit it. Then he had 88 rushing yards, 114 rushing yards at the Ravens when they lost in that game too. But he had 25 carries, 114 yards. The Commanders have been up and down run defense, but 152 yards. The Saints are not the easiest team to run against. 104 yards. The Giants, yeah, fine, but it's not like he's had this easy cakewalk of a schedule and he still just hits it week after week after week. So I'm not downing Kyren Williams. He's just has shown he's such a great talent. I'm taking that over on him in rushing yards.
Yeah, I think if I go anywhere with Kyren Williams, it's going to be anytime touchdown because he scores and he's the goal line option. So I feel better. I mean, with Gibbs and Montgomery, you can't go there, even there, right? Because you don't know who's going to get the ball in the scoring position. So that's a little bit tougher. But I know if they're inside the 5 Rams, they're most likely going to give Williams.
Well, his anytime touchdown's like minus 190.
Yeah, it's probably not great, but
you're not going to get any money.
Yeah, I wish it was a little bit lower. If Kyren Williams was at like 75, I knew that was not going to happen, but I would feel a little bit better. But don't fall into these scrimmage traps. I mean, there's all these scrimmage ones. You can't go scrimmage with Williams. Again, he doesn't catch passes. So you can't go there at 102.5, but 82.5 if you want that. If you want an adjusted line, that's also a good way to go for this, for a little less payday. Now, let's look at the wide receivers. Let's start with Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. Let's go there. You have 76.5 for Nacua. You have 68.5 for Kupp. Now, looking at these matchups, they're very interesting, right? They're actually, I think they're even, but I think Nacua has a better spot here. I think he's probably going to get Cameron Sutton on the outside. They've been bad. Brian Branch, he's a rookie. He has not been as good of late. He's shown some flashes covering in the inside. So I'd feel a little bit better with Puka, to be honest, but the line is bigger. So again, I think I'm going to go in on all these guys, but I would adjust maybe Puka's a little bit, but I could be very comfortable with 16.5 for Kupp.
Yeah, the thing with Kupp is he's been so inconsistent. I mean, how long of a stretch there where he was doing absolutely nothing from week 7 through 13? It was just killing you. Then had 2 big weeks in a row and then went back to doing pretty much nothing again. The 2 last games he played. So that's hard. I don't feel great about Cooper Kupp. It's obviously he could get there, but he's just too inconsistent for me. Puka Nacua is just on fire. I feel really good about his 76.5 receiving yards. Like you said, the Lions defense much better against the run than the pass. I expect Matthew Stafford to hit his over in passing. So I expect Puka Nacua to also have a good game, and Cooper Kupp will have some receptions as well. But what about Amon-Ra St. Brown with potentially no Sam Laporta? His line is high. It's at 87.5 receiving yards, but it should be. He's had 90 plus receiving yards in each of the last 4 games, and he should only get more targets, right? If Laporta's not there.
Yeah, I mean, looking now that we've talked about Nacua and Kupp, I think I would be more aggressive and go an alt line higher for Nacua and maybe an alt line lower for Kupp, so I could get both of those and feel good about that. No, this one, I'm not sure about this. It's right in a good spot, I think, at 87.5. Like, it's surprising. I think the matchup is actually pretty good. Quentin Lake is the slot corner here for the Rams. He's been pretty good all season. I'm not going to take that away from him, but covering him on Ross St. Brown is the difference. I would lean toward the over, right? We know where Jared Goff throws. He's going to look for Sam Laporta. Oh, he's not on the field. I'm going to throw to my slot guy over and over and over again. That's what's going to happen. They can also scheme him up and to be open outside, right? The Rams can give up big plays too. They're known to do that. Remember that game against the Saints, right? When you had A.T. Perry and Rashid Shaheed go downfield. So I think Amon-Ra St. Brown could actually hit a good chunk of this on 2 plays, right? So yeah. I'm still going to go there. I think, again, anything with the passing games I said I liked, and even with 87.5, I mean, I think he's a little bit pissed, right? I think look at the Pro Bowl rosters. I don't know why he gets upset. It's not like bad players in the Pro Bowl. He's probably going to eventually get there, but he's playing with a little bit of anger too. So I think he comes out and shows that in this game, and it's his team, right? It's his hometown team he's going after. He wants to show up Los Angeles. So I think he'll show up and he'll be motivated. And I think maybe I want to bump him up, Michelle. More and more I think about it. Maybe I want to go to like 90 or 100 or something and see what I can get. Because again, you don't have many games, so go for it a little bit in these matchups.
Yeah, and then I don't know who to pick as the winner here. I kind of feel like the Rams could win this game. I mean, the Rams have won 7 of their last 8 games. The only loss against the Ravens by 6 points. They're like the only team that kept close to the Ravens over the last couple months here. But this game being in Detroit, I don't know. It's such a hard one. I don't think I could pick one. Probably taking Rams +3, but I don't feel super confident about it.
Yeah, I'm taking Rams +3, and I actually do feel good about it. I have this as an over too. The over is 51.5. I think it's easily over. I have it as 31-27. So straight up win for the Rams in this one. I'm going money line on the Rams. And here's why. I think these are two big things. Sam Laporta, you're missing a key person to attack the weakness of the Rams defense. Then you have a key strength, right? Stopping the run for the Rams. That's going to put a lot of pressure on Jared Goff, where I think Matthew Stafford is going to see a lot more things open up downfield. He knows Ford Field. He's going to rip it. It's indoors. I think it doesn't also favor the Lions that way in a weird way. It's great. It's indoors. It's for Jared Goff, but I also think this road environment also really favors Matthew Stafford, which is a very familiar home to him.
Yeah, I think both of these guys have such a chip on their shoulder, probably. Like, there's such a reason for them to play their hearts out and just want to shove it to the other team, right? Like, you just threw me away. Like, if you're Jared Goff, you just threw me away, Rams, after taking you to a Super Bowl. And then Matthew Stafford, wants to prove that he's still the guy and he's better than Jared Goff. Like, there's so much here to prove to both of these guys. Rams are a scary team right now, and I feel unfortunate for the Lions that they ran into them in this first round.
Yeah, and you know how it goes, Michelle. I mean, Michigan had to lose. They won the championship. Look, Detroit sports fans are not going to double up here. They're not going to have this monster week. It goes with the territory. If one team wins, the other team is going to lose, and you got to just accept that and move on. So I think it'll be fun. So I just want a lot of high scoring points in these games. Those are the only things I want. So that's all we're looking for in fantasy. Now, tomorrow we'll close the week of shows looking at that final game. Yeah, it's Super Wildcard Weekend, so we'll have a game on Monday, Eagles-Bucks as well. So that's the last NFC game. We'll break that down for you. Then we'll have our look at the price picks of the week, and then we'll look at the last slate of games here and do a little FanDuel lineup with them as well for you. So a lot of good stuff to close the week for this Thursday edition of Locked On Fantasy Football. This has been Vinnie Iyer.
And I'm Michelle Magdziuk. Bye, y'all.